You're now watching the Mike Missanelli podcast on the BetRivers Network.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Mike Missanelli podcast, special emergency podcast. Doing it on Monday, the 1st of July, and it's sponsored by BetRivers. Don't forget to download your BetRivers app, and you can make all kinds of bets. I'll tell you a little later about a bad beat I had yesterday, betting the Phillies. But this is the big day to analyze what the 76ers are now. The free agency period has started, and they have landed their big fish. Paul George signed to a 4-year, $212 million max contract. He is 34 years old right now. That contract takes him to age 38. We'll discuss that in a little bit, and we'll discuss the pros and cons of what this means for the 76ers. But let's get caught up on what they've done now in free agency. They signed Andre Drummond as a backup center. A lot of people were clamoring for Andre Drummond. He's one of those guys that people in this town love for reasons that are unclear to me. He's a solid backup center. They got him. We can dispense with the guesses on who was going to be the backup center as we went through the Paul Reeds and the Mo Bambas last year. Now you got a solid backup center, and they also drafted one who basically is going to grow into that role in Adem Bona from UCLA. Highly touted athlete from UCLA, still has a long way to go, folks, to be an NBA player, but that's okay in center position. So they also re-signed Kelly Oubre. Now, as you know from listening to this, I'm not a big Kelly Oubre fan, but you got to fill out your roster somewhere along the line. So Kelly Oubre gets signed at a reasonable price, $8 million a year, and then they signed Eric Gordon to a 1-year deal for some guard depth. So and on top of all this, they get Tyrese Maxey under a max contract. So they've taken care of him. This was one of the big concerns that people had when they were going to do this. It was a matter of when and when they were going to do it, and not whether they were going to do it. So Maxey is firmly entrenched in the Sixer long-range plans. And, of course, they drafted Jared McCain, who will be on the roster as a backup guard. So let's take a look at the roster before we get to the pros and cons of Paul George. The roster as we see it right now. All right, let's go by the guard lot that I think will be with Maxey being paired up with Paul George. I think it's a formidable backcourt. And George has a terrific counterbalance to Tyrese Maxey. But they may go with him as a forward situation, and maybe Eric Gordon starts. But their guard lot right now, it looks like George, Maxey, Eric Gordon, Jared McCain, and Ricky Council IV if they decide that they're going to keep him. Embiid, Drummond, Bona, and I don't know what's going to happen with Paul Reed. I mean, can they play him at 4? Can they keep him on the roster? His money's not guaranteed. They could say sayonara to Paul Reed. I'm guessing that's what will happen. But again, you need guys to fill out your roster. So Oubre is there, and now they could go with a small lineup. But here's the small lineup scenario if they want to do that. Maxey Gordon in the backcourt, George Oubre at the forward spot, with George playing the power forward spot, and Embiid. Now, this is where they lack. They don't really have a 4. Who is the 4 on this team? You really can't, like Batum was counted on. He is not coming back to the Sixers. So they have a gap at 4, which may require them to play differently in their starting lineup. So now let's get to the cons first of Paul George, because in Philadelphia, we look at the negative before we look at the positive. And so I'm going to take care of this right away. Here's the con. And I've been saying this for a while. This is what Darryl Morey does. He believes in a 3-star concept. Now, if you look around the league the last couple of years, the 3-star concept really hasn't paid dividends. The teams that win are built with solid, maybe 2 stars, and some significant role players, not only on the starting lineup, but off the bench. So my question first would be, does the 3-star contingent work anymore, or does a more built-up foundation where parts fit in each spot? In other words, you just can't sign guys and throw them together anymore in this NBA. It's a young man's league. So now we're talking about you chase down a 34-year-old star, much like you did with Harden a couple of years ago, and that did not work. So that's my first concern, whether the three-star system works without significant role-playing depth. All right, number two, does it work when the third star is an aged star? Paul George is 34. Now, he won't be 35 until next May. Okay, so he's stuck at 34. Sometimes you say a guy's 34 and they're going to turn 35 in a couple of months. He won't turn 35 until May of next year. And does he have enough left in the tank? He has not been fully healthy for the last maybe 4 years. Last year, he was fairly healthy. He played 74 games last year. He played all 6 that the Clippers played in the playoffs after they were eliminated in the first round. But the years before last year, I'll just count them down. 56 games, 31 games, 54 games, 48 games. So here's the question. Will he play in enough games during the regular season to give the Sixers an advantage of a decent seed? Last year, they struggled to get into the playoffs. They had to go to a play-in tournament. Now, they're significantly better than they were last year with him in the lineup if he plays a significant period of games. There's load management up the wazoo with this guy, and he also gets injured a lot. And he has not had a good playoff track record of playing in games. He has been injured through a couple of playoffs, and you couldn't count on him in the playoffs. Now, again, I'm going over all the cons. I will get to the pros in a second. All right, I have to get all this out of my system. I have to get it all out of your system because you're thinking the same things that I'm thinking about. Let's look at the East. At its very best, let's just assume that Paul George plays a significant amount of games. With him playing a significant amount of games, will the Sixers right now, with their roster the way it looks, and they still have to add some people, and I don't know where they're going to go there, are they in the upper echelon of the East? Are they as good as Boston? Now, I just want you to say, Paul George says he plays 75 games. Are they as good as Boston? Are they as good as the Knicks? Are they as good as Indiana, Cleveland, Orlando, all these up-and-coming teams? I would say that right now, they are significantly better than those bottom teams that I just mentioned. Are they better now than Boston or the New York Knicks? And again, this is you have to take it to the max thought that he's going to play a significant amount of games. That remains to be seen. I can't sit here and say at this much, well, I can. They're not as good as Boston. No matter how many games he plays, in my opinion, they're not as good as Boston. They're chasing the championship, and it may not come to fruition that way. But this will lead into eventually our pros. All right? What is he at age 36, 37, 38? I have no answer to that. He's not superhuman like LeBron James. I can't imagine a world where he's going to be the Paul George that we know at age 36, 37, 38. But again, that doesn't matter, and here's why. And we'll get to now the pros of this. Here's the biggest pro question. What other choice did they have? They didn't have any other choice. Now, let's look at Darryl Morey. In general, he is a star hunter. And in being a star hunter, he apparently doesn't care about age. In fact, he said he doesn't care about age. In the last press conference, he said, it doesn't matter to me that a guy is 34 years old if he can still play. He's looking at Paul George like he looked at James Harden. Like a guy who still at this age is a significant dominant player in the NBA. Maybe he's right. I don't know. When you look around and see all the examples, it would be more likely to say that he's not right about that. That older players are not going to give you the same thing that they gave you 5 years ago, or certainly not 10 years ago. To me, this is a short-sighted philosophy. But he has to be true to his philosophy, right? A general manager can't change his stripes and all of a sudden say, well, I don't believe in that anymore. He can, but he also needs to keep a job. He also has to keep the Sixers viable. He also has this lurking albatross, which is the Embiid factor. Embiid now gives the Sixers that situation where you have to try to win now. You don't have years to play with to come up with some developmental system and do it like these other teams are doing it, where they buy into a system with younger players. You cannot do that. You're almost trapped with Joel Embiid, having the Joel Embiid window where you have to take advantage of that. And Morey's saying, I have just a minimal amount of time to get this thing together. There's no other alternative for me but to add another star player to get it done. I can't waste 2 years trying to develop a system like the Boston Celtics did, because I don't have Tatum and Brown, young stars that I can fill in with great role players. This is my only alternative. So when you look at it that way, you go, okay, I'm on board. Now, he also knows he's in Philadelphia, and that the Sixers and their fan base expects, with Embiid, for this team to be a contender every year. So he's got the public pressure to win now. To say nothing of the fact that if he doesn't win now, he's going to be out on his ass as a general manager. So all these factors now bring you to the conclusion that Paul George was a necessary element to add for the Sixers to try to win a championship. I always go back to the blackjack table. To win at blackjack, the only way you can win is to get most of the statistics and the analytics in your favor. You have to give yourself the best chance to win by knowing the strategies of blackjack. And even then, you're not going to win. And this is where Morey is now. He has to now go for broke. He has to say, okay, I have to make this work. I've got an Embiid window. I've got to have stars to get to that point. I don't have time to develop a system like the younger teams have done in this league. And so when we look at the other pros, they're formidable. Listen, their big three is very formidable. You look around the league, who has a better big three than the Sixers would right now with Maxey, George, and Embiid? But again, basketball is beyond three. Basketball is beyond five in the NBA. You need a roster of contributors. And in my world, when I see guys just thrown in there, like he did last year, Daryl Morey threw in guys last year. He threw in role players. It doesn't work that way. They all don't connect. Like you throw in a guy like Eric Gordon. Will he connect? Who knows? Last year you threw in a guy like Oubre and Batum and Marcus Morris and Covington and all these guys, and it didn't work. And I'm afraid that they're going down the same route, albeit that they have a better big three. So where do the Sixers stand at this particular situation? I don't know. I think it's pertinent at this time to read from a column that I read today from David Murphy of the Inquirer. Now, I don't often cite David Murphy. Sometimes he hits. Sometimes he just writes words. But I like the words he wrote today in a story in the Philadelphia Inquirer. So I'm going to read because he articulates it a lot better than I'm probably articulating it right now because he had time to stand over a keyboard and write words. Okay, so let me just read a little bit of this. Now, again, a lot of these the phrases, I hope, don't go over your head. Sometimes he's hard to understand. But here it goes. Give Daryl Morey credit. You may not like the game he plays, but he plays it better than anybody in the National Basketball Association. It is a game where regrets can be indefinitely postponed, which is what they've done from last year, where downstream risk are upstream opportunities. Downstream risk, he's 34 years old. Upstream opportunity, they've got now a big three that's very formidable, one of the best in the league. Where the future is no less uncertain a place when prioritized over the present. We always live in the future with Darryl Morey and the Sixers. Things are going to be better because I'm going to tweak it and I'm going to build and I'm going to sign this guy and I'm going to sign that guy. But he says it's a counterintuitive game, one that forsakes many of the fundamental tenets of traditional roster building. It is also a game that has consistently delivered to the Sixers a better chance at a championship than they had the year before, and this year will be no different. Yes, you look at it and go, they're closer to a championship than they were last year. Are they closer than the Boston Celtics? That's the key. Forget the risk for a moment, he writes. Forget the multitude of ways this can blow up in their face. Forget the age of the player. Forget his motivations for signing. Forget the challenge of filling out a roster with 3 massive salaries and little room to maneuver. In Paul George, the Sixers have added a player who offers them a better chance at winning a title. No other avenue would have allowed them to say as much. And that's what I said pretty much in my opening, that they have now maximized their chances, whatever those chances are, to actually win something. Is signing George a good move? It depends on your definition of good. In fact, it depends on whether you even believe in the concept of good in the first place. In Morey's world, good is just another word for not the best. It is a middle ground that distracts from the zero-sum reality of chasing a championship. Good is not an objective. It's a consolation prize, a coping mechanism. Good is the refuge of leaders who cannot handle the zero-sum reality of chasing a championship. It is an artificial construct created by those who need a more attainable objective than becoming the best. I can't argue with any of those words. He is playing a game where he is telling the fans, we're good, and we might be good enough. And that alone should bring you the optimism. And this is something he does every year. It's something he did when he signed Harden, and that fizzled. And now it's on to Paul George. But again, in a perfect world, Paul George is going to play 75 games. In an imperfect world, which is more likely, he's going to play less than 60. And less than 60 gives the Sixers what? I don't know. The same number as last year? Again, we're talking about whether a seed in the playoffs is important. If you finish in the top 5, maybe it isn't. But if you drift and you get close to play-in territory, you saw what it was last year. And at this point, I don't know what they are. The roster is incomplete. So in conclusion, within the Sixers' parameters, considering the fact that they must take advantage of the Embiid window, the Sixers and Morey had no better alternative than this. If it results in a championship, we're going to say, see, that guy's philosophy of signing stars was the right one. And if it doesn't work, which I don't think it will, and in the context of winning the East, maybe they get to the Eastern Conference Championship, I don't think they're good enough to beat the Boston Celtics. So what it results in is what David Murphy is referring to. Well, let's try something else. The window for Embiid is still open. He's not 38. He's still in the young 30s. And so we still have the window. And that gives Darryl Morey more of a chance to tell your fans, keep coming along with us. You know, hey, we're gonna get there eventually. I don't know. That's a philosophy that I don't really believe in, but it's the philosophy they have. They have, in this moment, in addition to signing the third star, they have assembled a throw darts at a wall roster again, where they go, okay, Oubre at that. Can we do any better than Oubre? Nah. Can we do any better than Eric Gordon, who's ancient? Nah, we'll throw him in there. We're going to have to sign now a couple other guys to fill out the roster. We're going to have to find a 4-man. The P.J. Tuckers and the Nicholas Batums of the world just to fill in that position. Boom, dart. Boom, dart. Boom, dart. Don't get conned into thinking that 3 people can carry the Sixers to a championship. What did Oprah say? It takes a village? Well, in the NBA, it takes a village. This league is damn hard. And you're no longer winning any championship with just 3 players. All right. That is my look at the Paul George signing, the Maxey signing, the Kelly Oubre signing, the Andre Drummond signing, the Eric Gordon signing. A bunch of new players are coming in. Can they gel? Can we think that it's realistic that if you just add a star, a team could be really good? Or do we need blending? I don't know. But we're going to have to put up with it for another season. So Sixer fans, I know you're riding hope today about Paul George. I feel better about the Sixers now that they added Paul George. Do I feel good enough? Not yet. We'll see if we can get there. Thanks for listening to this special Mike Missanelli podcast, a reaction of the Sixers signing Paul George on the BetRivers Network. Have a great rest of the week, everybody, with July 4th coming up. Celebrate where you will with the fireworks and all that kind of stuff, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.